if anyone has any questions that they want to deal with. All right, again, want to welcome everyone to this question and answer session. We are live on Zoom. Are actually trying this on YouTube, right on my YouTube channel, Rabbi Chaim Kaufman. Check me out on YouTube. We're live there. We are live on Zoom. We are live on Facebook. So we're all over the place actually. So without further ado, anyone you don't have any questions that that they want to deal with? Or important for um, it's important for a number of reasons. One reason is that someone has a question. They're not sure which direction to go. So most important thing, I think, in the conversion process, or even a person's not necessarily in the conversion process, and that is that you have to have a mentor. You have to have somebody that is competent to answer questions. And if they can't, then they know who to go to. But a person, if they have a doubt, and then and they're not sure, or look up the proper sources, they look up the proper sources or whatever the case is, and still not sure. So then you have to go to someone who can properly answer. And that person criteria, just just as a side point, the Talmud says that anyone wants to learn by someone, that person has to be similar in your eyes to an angel. Now, it doesn't mean they're perfect, by any stretch. Nobody's perfect. But I had one rabbi of mine who said he learned under somebody for a short amount of time, and the person that he learned under was unbelievably brilliant, Talmudic. Last, he didn't last very long, learning by them. So a person will say, well, how can a person have all that knowledge and still be, a disgusting individual, and still be, someone who's, has got bad character traits or whatever. So it's famous case we brought out by Aristotle. Everyone knows Aristotle was a great philosopher. Aristotle himself was also a disgusting individual, and his students once caught him in the act doing something disgusting. And they asked him, how could this, great Aristotle do what you're doing? So he said, Aristotle the philosopher, Aristotle does these other things. So, we don't, within Judaism, we don't compartmentalize. People make mistakes. People will pay for their mistakes, but at the end of the day, at the end of the day, a person has to be, working on them, working on character traits, etc. Someone asked, Bertrand Russell, famous professor, and asked him, he taught ethics. He said, if you teach ethics, how could you be so unethical? And his answer was, well, if I taught mathematics, you'd expect me to be a square, right? So we don't hold by that. It's either you're going in the right direction or you're not going in the right direction. And if you're not going in the right direction, you just fall into an abyss. And you can be intellectual. You can have a 250 IQ. You can know, the Talmud inside and out, to know this inside and out. But if you don't have good character traits, then what's it worth? Right? I've seen a number of times where people have, maybe called rabbi or whatever, and someone disagrees with them, they just call them out, call them names, say other things. So, something like that, you gotta question, even if the person has knowledge, which this person didn't. But, even if the person would have knowledge and would be a rabbinical scholar in their own right, so what happened to Derech Eretz? what happened to treating people, with respect? Doesn't matter you agree with them or disagree with them, right? It's not my way or the highway. You have to be respectful. Someone asks you a question, okay. So even if you disagree or whatever, you still have to, you still have to be respectful. So I've seen a lot over the years. There's some things that you just like, just like absolutely boggle the mind. You can't believe someone A would say something, in such a way, and then, call people out and say, well, guess what? It's my way or the highway, and obviously you don't know how to learn. You don't know anything, so I'm gonna put you down. So that person is not I wouldn't call him a rabbinical scholar in any stretch, no matter how much, how much they know. You're gonna have respect for others. Someone asks, so anyway, whatever. I thought I'd talk about that, about that, about that topic, and certainly just one, one side, one side thing about it, and that is, as we mentioned, someone you're going to learn under, or you want to learn under, has to be in your eyes, as the Talmud says, like like an angel. But you have to see how they act. You have to see how they act as well. They call people out on social media. They make, call people names and, etc. It degrades a person. It certainly, degrades a person. So like they're calling out someone and say, oh, you're a heretic and you're doing this and you're promoting this and, that's against Judaism and that makes you, that makes you a heretic and all these different things. That's one thing. If a person's dangerous or, if they're, I just saw another post against, open orthodoxy about promoting gay marriage and this and that. That's something you come out against. Themselves orthodox, how can they sanction that? So what's the answer? They can't. It's forbidden, right across the board. It's forbidden. I don't know. You want to give me Webster's fifth definition on that? Whatever the case is, but you can't call yourself orthodox if you're promoting that. So yeah, so there are people out there calling them out, and they should be called out, because don't call yourself orthodox, call yourself something else. But it's very misleading, and people don't know what to do with the information. And see, well, if this person's orthodox, it looks like they're saying that it's okay and that it's right, and whatever. But if it goes against what the Torah says, they mentioned last week, Leviticus chapter 18. What's Chief Rabbi of England going to say? Leviticus chapter 18 is forbidden. No, you have to understand. We have to explain it in the schools. We have to teach our kids. Etc. Okay, I understand you're getting political pressure. But the Muslims certainly aren't going to do it. They'll lay down and die before they do that. So if they get money subsidized from the government, okay, so maybe you're not going to have to take. Maybe they're gonna make life more difficult, whatever the case is. But if you represent Judaism, and you're the chief rabbi, you can't come out and say that's okay. And that's a fundamental thing we can teach in our schools. Like you say, okay, people don't hold of him, and it's only a political position. He's always saying things politically correct, but doesn't really believe in it, whatever. But at some point, you gotta have a backbone. You can't, it doesn't matter. Maybe you lose your job, so you lose your job. But either Torah is true, it's not true. So the government says this, government says that. Who cares? You're gonna say, well, they have power. They could, take away funding. They could do this. Could be. But at the end of the day, you want, the school of Volozhin, famous yeshiva of Volozhin, run by Reb Chaim of Volozhin, the famous student of the Vilna Gaon, when they wanted to introduce Russian language into the school, right? All schools had to teach Russian language. He shut it down. We're talking about something abominable, an alternative lifestyle. Why did he turn it down? Because that's going to lead to other worse things. You're going to say, okay, so for an hour a day or half an hour a day or whatever the curriculum was that they wanted to teach Russian language in the school. That's enough to close it down. So Reb Chaim understood. If you allow that, then you say, okay, we're going to give in to that. They're going to make you teach other things that are worse. Even though you might say, well, learning Russian language is not so bad, right? And grammar and all that. Maybe they'll make you read Russian books. Maybe you'll be stuck reading Dostoevsky. Who knows what? Then you start asking what bad things happen to good people. So they'll start doing all these other things, and then they'll open up and start teaching about atheism and why do you think the Torah is true and the Bible's true and all this, and so he shut it down. He shut down the school for something that really didn't seem so bad, but he understood that once you open the Pandora's box, it's pretty much game over. Somebody asks, kosher slobbering. I assume you mean slaughter, but I'm not sure what slobbering here is. Is it still an issue? The animals, if they have an issue on the way to the slaughter, how the animal is there and etc. So if I understand the question correctly, you can correct me if I'm wrong. And that's if the animal, let's say on the way to slaughter, they're holding it down and something happens, drops dead of a heart attack, and you slaughter it properly, animal strafe. Why? Because something happened, right? Something happened before. So if something happens before, the animal dies, and then you slaughter it properly, so that's forbidden, right? That's certainly you're not allowed to. That's certainly you're not allowed to derive. You're not allowed to eat it, right? You're certainly not allowed to eat it. You'd have to give it. To a to a non-Jew, right? Because it's going in that way, meaning that something bad has happened on the way that will render it unfit for ritual slaughter. So if it's something that renders it unfit, if it's something's going to render it unfit, so then it has to be, you won't be able to eat it, right? There's no possible way. There'll be no possible way to eat it, and therefore, it should be therefore it should be an issue. So the main thing is, again, when the animal's taken in, the animal itself has to be, you got to make sure nothing happens. Meaning that, if they tackle the animal and there's even a worry that like they broke a leg, a bone or something, so that's going to render it unfit. That's for sure going to render it unfit. All things being equal, if that's not an issue, right? If that is, if that's not going to be an issue, so then I don't have to worry and think that this, that this animal is going to be considered treif, right? Because otherwise, we'll bring in the Talmudic dictum, "Ein l'davar sof." There's no end over here. Well, maybe this happened, maybe that happened, maybe any number of things. Any number of things happen, right? Certainly, certainly could be. Certainly could be. So, that being said, how far, how far do I have to take it? In other words, if all things being equal, the animals take it. So let's make clear: if the animal's being taken in, right? If the animal's being taken in, then unless I have good reason to think that something's happened, that something has rendered it, that something's rendered it non-kosher, right? Something, I don't know, whatever it is that, the animal may have fallen, animal may have, been handled in a rougher way, that we're going to think that something may have happened. Okay, so then at least externally you're going to have to check it. If you check it externally, and there's no issue, so then internally, after the animal's slaughtered, then you're going to get it checked, right? Sorry, then the ritual slaughterer is going to come, and the ritual slaughter is going to come and check it. But again, all things, if all things are the same, then as long as that animal gets checked, and everything is good, so then there shouldn't be any, there should be no issue, right? They'll check the inside, they'll check the lungs, they'll check maybe a few other places, right? And when they do that, what they're going to find is probably nothing. So if they don't find anything wrong, so then there's no problem, right? Then there shouldn't be an issue. If they find an issue, right? They find a hole in the lung, they find a hole in the stomach, they find a hole, whatever. They find something that's going to render it a non-kosher animal. So then the bottom line is the animal won't be kosher, right? That'll be it. There won't be any issue. But if the animal's taken in and there's no reason to suspect anything's wrong, still there are certain things in that animal you're going to check, right? You're going to check the lungs, etc. So you're going to have to check anyway, right? But I don't necessarily have to worry. Something's happened unless there's that issue. Even though a person may say, well, if you have to check it anyway, what am I worried about when I bring the animal? Well, the main thing you're worried about bringing the animal is the fact that it may be treif right now, right? You want to make sure that the animal is kosher, and there are no issues before you slaughter, because what's the point of slaughtering it if you already know there's an issue, right? If you already know there's an issue, then there's no point to slaughter it. That animal will get sold for pennies on the dollar to a non-Jew, and that'll be the end of that. So one thing you have to be careful. You have to make sure that the animal itself is not it doesn't die before it's slaughtered, or it doesn't. If the animal's handled in a certain way, there certainly may be an issue with the kashrus of the animal, right? That's for sure. That certainly may be an issue. But in any case, if there is no issue, I don't have to assume there will be one, and therefore, whatever happens, I'm going to check the inside anyway, right? Certainly for a cow, you can check the lungs, right? You may check the stomach here and there, right, to make sure there are no nails or whatever, in the stomach, etc., to render it a treifer. Otherwise, I shouldn't have to worry. It shouldn't be an issue. It shouldn't be an issue either way. So I hope that deals with the with the issue with that. So I lost my connection on Facebook, but see anyone comes back, has any other has any other questions. That was one. That was one by kashrus of an animal. One thing, just speaking about kashrus of an animal, one of the things that a ritual slaughter has to be careful with is that when he cuts the neck, so to speak, and he cuts the two sides, the trachea and the windpipe, right? You're gonna make sure that the knife isn't pushed too far down, because then if the knife hits, let's say, the vertebrae, you get a nick in the knife, it's a problem. You could also have an issue if the knife goes too far down, not just in the backbone. Let's say, a person was ritually slaughtering a chicken or something like that, and goes straight through and hit the ground. Right, you have to make sure that knife doesn't hit the ground, knife doesn't get any nicks. You have to know if it did, when it happened. I mean, it's complicated. You need a ritual slaughter that has a tremendous amount of fear of heaven. You have to know the halachas, you have to know the laws very well, etc. So, there's a lot that goes into ritual slaughter. Not to mention the fact, the expense of getting, having it salted and cut up and distributed, etc. So it will cost more. A number of things going on, at the same time while this is being done. So, certainly it's a much more, delicate process, as they may say. So, there's a lot of things that go into it. A ritual slaughterer, has to be someone who has fear of heaven. He has to have a tremendous amount of fear of heaven. Because if not, he could be putting,